Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another Creator Hangout at Kickstarter. My name is Terry Romero. I am the Food Outreach Lead, and a Creator Hangout is part of our weekly series where we have a lively Q&A with one of our awesome creators of Kickstarter projects. And I am really excited for today's Hangout because we're going to be talking to Leanne Brown, who is a cookbook author. She's a food advocate, and she is an avid home cook right here in New York City too, but by way of Canada. Her project was Good and Cheap, an amazing cookbook that is for everybody, but it's especially for people working with very tight budgets, something I'm sure a lot of us can relate to, and particularly those on SNAP and food stamp benefits. And without any further ado, I'd love to introduce Leanne. Hi, Leanne. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Keeping cool, right?
Yeah.
Hot day.
Pretty good today, yeah.
Awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to just cover some basic questions about like what is good and cheap, how you approached your Kickstarter project, with the idea of how to inform our viewers. And everyone out there, we want to hear from you. This is really about also what you want to know about launching a Kickstarter
lay your
project.
questions on me. I would love to know what I've never heard before.
Go ahead, bring them on. And how do you do that, you're probably wondering? Well, you can do that right here on the Hangout itself on G+. You can also reach us on Twitter at Kickstarter Tips. And at any point during this time, go ahead and bring on your questions. But let us begin, Leanne. So can you talk a little bit or a lot about the premise of Good and Cheap and what is going on with Good and Cheap today before we dig into going back in time?
Sure, yeah, actually it's kind of cool to be doing this today because we kind of made a couple of big announcements yesterday, actually.
Wonderful.
It was, oddly enough, it was the 2-year anniversary of finishing the Kickstarter. So we did it 2 years ago, yesterday. And it had kind of just clicked over. The free PDF of the cookbook has been downloaded over 1 million times now.
What, 1 million times?
Yeah, 1 million times, which is so cool. And at the same time, we were announcing our updated numbers of all the giveaway copies. So we've now donated over 70,000 copies of the book. Now, this isn't all the Kickstarter project. This is sort of what the book has become now, but sort of that's the update of where the project's at now. And it all, of course, started on Kickstarter. So I just thought that was kind of awesome to be able to announce that and then be here with you today.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. So, but where did it start? So it's
what is Good and Cheap?
Yes,
exactly.
So Good and Cheap, it's what you said. It's a cookbook sort of really designed for people living on a very small budget. So that's why it's called Good and Cheap, Eat Well, and $4 a day. The $4 a day isn't like something that I was just like, oh, that seems like a good number. In fact, I think it's a pretty, to be frank, it's a pretty lousy number. I wish that, people had more. I would hope that more Americans have $4 plus to be working with. But the reality is that between 44 and 46 million people are living on the equivalent of about $4 a day. So that's like a SNAP or food stamps budget. And when I was in grad school, I was learning about all this stuff. I was in food studies at NYU, and I was learning more about this. And I think I just was particularly interested in it. Like, coming from Canada, we don't have food stamps in Canada. We have, social programs, of course, but we don't have that specific program. And so to me, it was just this really interesting difference between our two countries, which are so similar in so many ways. And just finding out about those numbers and the sorts of situations that people are living in, it made me angry, frankly. It made me like the most angry of anything. And I just wanted to do something about it, or I wanted to do something. And I felt like there's so much, obviously there needs to be huge policy changes. There's so much to be done, but that stuff sometimes feels so daunting. And this was something that I could do with my skills sort of right now. I know that the key to eating well really is to be able to cook, that the cost of basic foods in America is actually very low. But the bigger barrier is being able to put those things together well, and sort of kind of knowing what to do and have the confidence to do it, have the means to get to those places, all these sorts of things. And so I felt like one thing that I could do was to create and share some really appealing recipes that sort of fit within that budget. And I never So that was sort of my thesis project, and I ended up putting it online as a free PDF, and kind of didn't really tell many people about it actually at first. I was like, oh, I'm sort of like nervous and a little embarrassed, like what if no one likes it, whatever, that kind of thing. And within a few weeks of putting it up, I ended up coming home from work and someone had shared it on a Reddit thread, and it had like gone sort of miniature viral on Reddit. And it had a zillion downloads sort of right away, and all these, and I was so freaked out by it. I was at first afraid that people were mad at me, because somehow like getting Reddit, it always feels like a catastrophic thing. But it turned out to be all these like wonderful, friendly people who were so encouraging and saying like, oh, this is awesome. Some of the first people that ever wrote to me. I remember Christian, this young man, he was a student, and he said, I'm going back to school for the first time in my life. I'm having to go on food stamps. And I was so scared that I was just going to be eating nothing but ramen. And now I've seen your cookbook and I'm relieved. And I sort of followed up with him, and he is doing really well. And it was just like, it was such an incredible, like basically people just gave me the courage to do it. And that's where all that encouragement and excitement sort of in Reddit, and then it spread to Tumblr and a few other sort of friendly, lovely parts of the internet, kind of gave me the courage. And I was like, we should do a Kickstarter to make actual physical books rather than just having the PDF. And so that was the inspiration, really.
I love that. I love that, like, just all that encouragement brought on. Is this your first cookbook?
It was my sort of. I did make one when I was in Canada, sort of casually for some friends and family, and I sold it at like a craft fair. It's called From Scratch. It's on my website. It's still free. At this point, to me, it's sort of like, as the creator of it, I'm like embarrassed, but it's like not as good as it should be. But but it's it's not bad either. So I did have some experience. And which is why I was sort of like, I can do this. I can kind of make this work and make it attractive. I was kind of confident about that. But then, in terms of like the Kickstarter itself, I think it just seemed, a few people have asked me like, why did you decide to do the Kickstarter in particular? And for me, it was just, it seemed so perfect. Like with that experience was like, here I was like a student, I was like desperately looking for a job. Like I'm from Canada. I'm really hard to hire. It's true. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like how, and I wasn't sure that people wanted it. And then when it was clear that people did, I realized that I needed to make it sort of happen. And in order to print cookbooks, obviously physical cookbooks, you do need money, but we still wanted to make it freely available for people who couldn't afford it. Cause $20 for a cookbook is just insane when you have $30 a week for food. And I didn't want that cost to be obviously a barrier for anyone. And so there are all these models, like the Tom Shoes model, there's so many companies that are doing this sort of buy one, give one. So that seemed to make perfect sense. And so my husband and I kind of put our brains together and a few other friends and thought about it for a while, how to kind of structure it. And we launched it. And I remember, I think we asked for $10,000, which would have allowed us to print 2,000 total. I think we could send 1,000 to our backers and then donate 1,000. And we figured we could break even for that. It would like be okay, it'd be manageable. We could like have all the boxes in our apartment and it would be fine. But we did a little bit better than that. It was, we reached the goal. What was it, in the first 36 hours? I was like, oh my God. It was like the most crazy 36 hours of my life, I think. And then every day after that just became even more amazing as we climbed up to this huge goal. Because it's so exciting. I mean, I'm sure you guys hear these stories all the time about how both wonderful it is to have that kind of support and terrifying too, when you're also like, oh my gosh, how do I make a project that's like 14 times the size of what I thought it was going to be? Like, can I do this? But we managed it somehow.
But you did, and here you are today.
With the help of a lot of people.
Before we go to our next question, just a reminder that we are live, so we want to hear questions from you, good people watching right now. You can do that by asking a question right here on the G Plus Show channel, or you can go to Twitter and go to Kickstarter Tips. So, Leanne, I know too that doing a cookbook, kicking a cookbook.
I mean, that is,
Right, a cookbook. They have long lead times. There's a lot going on with cookbooks. There's writing, there's photography, there's testing. So there's a lot to do. So at what point during the process of creating the brand new Good and Cheap book did you decide, okay, this is where we're going to do the Kickstarter? How much work is left over? I think that there's a lot of logistics that people would really like to know, like
Sure.
how you handle that part.
Yeah, so my cookbook is probably a lot different than the way other people would do it. So it's not quite copyable, but I would say, so I basically had a finished version that was my thesis project, basically, that I had sort of slightly changed. Like I took out some of the super academic language at the beginning and changed some stuff. But that was the PDF version. So I kind of already had that. And then with the Kickstarter, so it's like I sort of had proved that I could do it. It already existed physically. It was printable into a book. It was designed to be printed into a book. So that was kind of already there. And then what I did was I had one reward level that was I would work with you to add a recipe to the book. And I quickly realized I couldn't do too many of those and keep track. Because really the idea was like, in a way, this is different than a lot of cookbooks because it was a thing that already existed. And the project was about getting it out to people.
Right.
And so that was sort of more the goal. And so our goals for when to get it out to people was sort of as soon as we could. So we'd said that we wanted to get it out to people by September. And so I was like, okay, well, I can't add that much more content or do that much messing around because I'm going to have a little over a month after the Kickstarter is done to sort of get that all together. Okay. So I had a structure that was pretty good. And then I added these 20 recipes I worked with these 20 wonderful people. And some of the recipes that ended up in the book are so great. I am so happy I did that because I got amazing ideas from it. One of them is one of the most popular recipes in the book is peanut butter and jelly bars, which I got from a person who had suggested. He was actually really open-ended about it, but it was a friend of mine, and I knew that he worked for a food bank. And so I was thinking about like, what are some things that, like, what's something that you always can get at the food bank? It was peanut butter and jelly and oats. But I was like, how can you like make that into something a little different than PB&J and then oatmeal? And so I'm so grateful that that's in the book because it's really, really popular especially amongst people with young kids, because you can make it a zillion different ways depending on what kind of jam you have. And then there's another one that has this amazing story, Filipino chicken adobo. And I got to learn this incredible story of this wonderful man, Tony Pangilinan, who told me the story of his family moving from the Philippines to the US in the 70s and his experience on food stamps a few times in his life. And it was just like, so that was awesome sort of as a process. And I learned, so the Kickstarter really contributed to that because they added to that story. But then I also got information from the backers about what they liked and didn't like. Like I was wrong. I didn't realize that a lot of people were as interested in sort of the shopping tips and some of the stuff at the beginning of the book. To me, like, my favorite part of the cookbook was always like the recipes and the photos. So I was like, we gotta, we don't want to overload them with this, but people wanted more of that. So I added some more of that. So really for me, it was like a pretty solid thing to begin with. And then I was lucky enough to sort of have more information to people. And I was sort of like trying to be open about like what would work for the book and put it out there. But then, within the time frame that we had as well, which was a little bit tight, I must say. It was not easy to get it out in that time, but we did. But I think if I was doing it again, sort of more pitching, like here's the idea of what I want to do for the Kickstarter, I would definitely just have it with much longer lead time. You probably need you probably need at least 4 to 6 months to make a cookbook of any size, especially if you have, anything else going on, like a day job or any other projects that you're working on. It's a lot. And things go wrong too. Like sometimes the recipes don't work and you're like, well, gotta make this again or try something totally different. So
that's like speed cookbook, by the way. I think all the lead times, like, wow. And 1 month is incredible.
It was, that was just for 20 recipes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I do have a question here, and this kind of goes back to a little bit of what you talked about before, but this goes into the process slightly more from Marianne. So you said before, so the rewards, like the goal was to create the book just for more people, right?
Yeah.
So there was a download. She's wondering, was the free download separate from the Kickstarter? And was the Kickstarter for the printed books only, which seems like it was for both?
It was,
as well. And this goes more into your process a little bit, and which is really interesting for people because Are you self-published technically? Did you use a publisher? Were you working with a publisher? And if so, if you were self-published, did you get an editor? What kind of team did you assemble?
Well, okay, so for the original one, the original PDF was available sort of freely on my website, and I used it for the Kickstarter. Obviously, it was, it was available. It was still free. I just sort of said, hey, share this with people if they like it. Great. I think it was a great sort of piece of, I guess, marketing in a way. It was like something that people could easily share with one another. So it was extremely useful, and I think it sort of created trust between me and the backers and people that they were sharing it with, because it was like, oh, she's already done this, so here it is. And then when I added the 20 new recipes and kind of changed things into the Kickstarter version, I updated the free PDF. So the books that were printed and then sent out, the free ones and the ones to backers, it was the same as the PDF, and that's the one that's still available on my website. Mm-hmm. But after the Kickstarter, so with this this amazing output we had of support, we were able to print 40,000 books, which is amazing. But our goal was really to get as many into the hands of people who couldn't afford them as possible. So we actually had, the breakdown was, we sent out 7,000 to backers, and then we sent out 9,000 for free to different organizations across the country. And that process was insane. I'd be happy to sort of get into it, but it's like a long and crazy thing. Oh, yeah. And then the balance, sort of what we started to do as we were making more money, and people wanting to, was to try to like figure out how can we get as many out to people as possible. Mm-hmm. How can we print as many books as possible and then try to get them out to people, was we decided that we would make them available at cost. So to nonprofits. So we actually sold the balance. So it was 7,000, 9,000, and then the extra, the 24,000 we sold at cost. So about $4 per copy to nonprofits across the country. So those 24,000 got out to people. So we actually ended up distributing 33,000 to nonprofits, who then went and gave them to their clients with that. And so after that, they all came out in September, and we had them. They were really popular. They were super spoken for, like from the beginning, like everything was going so fast. So we had them out. We were sold out by the end of December of 2014. And so at that point I was exhausted. And it was actually during the Kickstarter that I was approached by a publisher. So that version we self-published completely. We used this incredible printer, designed, created it all. Myself and my husband helped with some of the design, especially sort of liaising with the printer. He was super helpful with. And then, so we printed everything off, but then I wasn't super excited about having to go through all that insanity again, to do it over. So when a publisher approached me and said, let's make a new version, and we'll be your publisher, and we'll like put this out into the world for you, into, on Amazon and in bookstores and everywhere, and we'll still have the buy one, give one promise, I was like, yes, thank you. Because then I could just be more of an author and not also the distributor, which, we've gotten through, but it's like, we're not experts at that. Like that was really hard. We don't have warehouse space, but like it was crazy. But it was sort of self-published, and I also didn't have an editor with the first version. Oh, okay. So my editor was my husband, who is he is a professional editor, so he is really good, and so I was incredibly lucky to have that. But then I also, even with the big rush on the 1 month with all the new recipes, I actually sent the rough version out to my Kickstarter backers and said, like, hey guys, if you see anything bad, just let me know. Yeah. So they were this incredible resource sort of repeatedly for me. But it's been awesome to work with a publisher after that. But I took my own photos and did all the rest of the stuff for myself, just because that's what I like. I find it fun. I would miss getting to take the photos if I let someone else do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Food photography is great. Everyone who does a cookbook should know how to do that. So we have about 10 minutes or so, or maybe a little more than that. I just want to remind everyone that keep bringing on your questions. You can do that right here on G+, or you can go to Twitter to Kickstarter Tips. So I think we're definitely hovered around this question. Like everyone always wants to know, what's that number? What do I pick for my funding goal? What does that mean? So what was your funding goal, your original one? And what went into that?
That's a good question. I think it's so individual. It's really kind of, I know this is like a terrible, like frustrating answer, but it's really so dependent on what your product is and kind of what your ambition and your goals are. So obviously the way, Kickstarter works is if you don't get the goal, you can't do it at all. So you really want to pick something that is like an amount that is kind of the minimum that you think you really need. Like you can't do it with less than this. And so for me, the $10,000 was, we sort of crunched the numbers, and basically we figured that we could print 2,000 books for that. And that would be something that we would be really proud of. That would be like felt like a really big project that felt totally significant. We could work with, I had thought that we would just work with a couple of nonprofits in New York. We could like have a big party, do the giveaway. It felt manageable. And we had looked in, it seemed like we could break even, basically, like we wouldn't lose money if we did that. And so that was the minimum. Obviously, like really hoped that we would get more. I didn't think, I was thinking like maybe maximum like double that, not 14 times that. But that was sort of cautious. We were fairly cautious. I think sometimes people are a little more, people want to do something a little bit bigger. And so they put the goal bigger, and that is great, I think. And I think, sometimes the bigger you go, the more then people will come out to support you because it looks like you need it more. So it's a little bit of I think it depends on like how comfortable you are with risk in some ways. But I think, at minimum, you want to do something where you can break even. So just figure out like, how can you break even? Try to take into account as much as you can. Think through all of your production costs, all of you should maybe even, and we didn't think about this with the first version, but you're like paying yourself, like your time, like how much time are you going to be spending on this? If you need to do that. And then all of the shipping costs, which are very significant.
Oh, yes.
And can be kind of hard. And that was what became like a kind of moving target as things go better. You're like, what is my shipping gonna be? Right? And then all these extra things come out because you're like, wait, at first we didn't need to have a space. Okay, now we need a space. And now we need all these like different equipment to kind of deal with it. So that stuff kind of becomes bigger depending on the size of your project. So you just really need to think. It's the boring parts. Like you need to basically make a mini business plan for yourself and figure out like best worst case scenarios and figure out kind of what your goals are there. And that's what your number should be, I think. Like starting a business, really like you're asking people for a business loan. What's the amount that you need to make this happen for yourself? And be as reasonable as you can and be reasonable with yourself too. Like, I think that's one thing, it turned out well, but I kind of regret like, I didn't really factor in sort of paying myself initially, which just because I was like, this is so exciting. I'm so excited to do this. We have to do this. Doesn't matter, we'll just do it with the minimum. But it's really hard, and it takes away, like, it's really hard to do a Kickstarter if you have a full-time job. You can do it, but you need to have support. You need to have people who you can rely on, because it just it seems like, you just make it happen and then you launch it and then whatever, and it's not like that. Like, as you know, there's so much to do each day, and really, if you're not giving it your all every day while the campaign is on, pitching it to people, keeping up with people, coming up with different ideas for how to reach out to more people, then you're kind of wasting your time. And so you really want to set yourself up to be like solid and supported so that you can just give it your all for the time of your campaign. You really need to be present. I love that you said that. So just one reminder, everyone, we have maybe about 6 minutes or 5 minutes left. So we can still take a question or two. Feel free to reach out here or to Twitter at Kickstarter Tips. So I know it's making a book, you want to share the book with you, but can you talk a little bit about your rewards, about like the different levels? Because these are ways that your backers will interact with what you're doing. So what did you create and what kind of responses did you get? Right. So ours were really mostly based around, our big goal was just to be able to make books, get them to the people who wanted them, and give lots away to people who also wanted them but couldn't afford them. And so with that goal in mind, we created, I think we had the $5 level, which was just really like, you know, you can get the free PDF. Obviously, you can get the free PDF without paying the $5, but it's just kind of like, this is your, you know, thanks for supporting the project. This is helpful kind of level, which I think is a really smart one for just about any anything where people just want to say like, hey, I like this. And $5 isn't a big deal for a lot of people. It's just a nice way to support. And then so the first level at which you could get a book was $20. And that was sort of our basic cost. That was kind of what we were selling it for, was $20. But then we wanted to incentivize people to buy one and give one. So we made the buy one, give one, just a straight one, $25. So it was only $5 more to give a book. And then we wanted to incentivize it further, sort of as cleverly as we could. So we had one that was $29, and that was buy one and give two. And that was the most popular level. And I think because people looked at it and said, this is the best deal. And it totally is. If your idea of a good deal is to get as many as possible to people. So that was really, a lot of people asked us like, what's your math on this? And it was like, it's just like we're trying to get people to do it. And like and that was so $4 was sort of the just straight cost of each of the books. That was, and that was the amount that we sold the cases to nonprofits. So it was like, we weren't making money off of those ones, or, you know, to add back into the project, blah, blah, blah. So that was the most popular. And then the others were just, like I said, I think it was $100. I would develop a recipe with you and add it to the book. We only had 20 of those. I think those sold out within the first day as well. I initially didn't put a cap on it, and then it was really popular at first day, and I started to freak out, and I was like, oh God. So we put a cap on it at $20. And then I think I had one that was like it was a cooking class I would do with you, which just a few people did, and that was for a bit more money. And that was really just, I think there are a few people who really just were like, you know what, I have money, and I really like this idea, and I want to be able to support you. And of course, Kickstarter allows you to support at any level you like. So there were a few people who were just really generous who just wanted to support it. I think he was anonymous, but there was a guy who put us over the $10,000 amount in the first night. And we noticed it when it happened, because he just dropped $1,000 on it sort of out of nowhere. And we were like, oh my gosh. And he didn't want any reward. He was just like, I really like this. And we were so excited. It was amazing. So I really think that the point with the rewards, or what I sort of learned, was keep them sort of relatively simple and really focused on what your goals for the project are. Like, our project goals were to make this cookbook that we had here already into a thing that we could get out to people. And so they were all sort of based really on that goal. And I think that was also clear to people. So it was sort of clear which one sort of worked for them, worked for their budget, whatever they wanted. But it also sort of further, I think, made it clear the intentions that we had with the Kickstarter, and that we were trustworthy, and that this was really what we were trying to do. There wasn't a lot of other, I see a lot of Kickstarters where the sort of later reward levels have a lot of like buttons and hats with the logo, and it's like, that stuff's cool, but I don't want that stuff, like I want to support your project, the core of what it is. That's what I'm excited about. I don't need like a bag that has the thing on it. Like, that just doesn't motivate me at all. And so I didn't add that kind of stuff in, because I felt like it was superfluous, and I think it adds a lot of work on for the creators, and I don't know that it really motivates people.
Right.
So I sort of feel like, don't sort of fall into that as like, add some extras. Think really hard about what is it that people are going to want out of this, and what are some things that are worth it, and what stuff that won't take away so much time from me as the creator, from the core of what I want to do too.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. I was going to ask for number one tips for people thinking of that, and I think that's an amazing tip. I want everyone to remember that one when making the rewards. So we have about a minute. Do you want to tell people about like where they could find Good and Cheap now, and
sure.
maybe big plans for the future?
Right. Well, I mean, the project right now, I sort of almost feel like it's not winding down, but that it's kind of like it's really happened, and now we're just trying to maintain. We continue to get the books out to people. I want to try to tell more of the stories of the nonprofits that we're working with. But the place you can go really is you can obviously get the book anywhere, and for every single one that you buy, anywhere books are sold, we will donate one to someone who needs it. And you can go to my website, leannebrown.com, and if you go to leannebrown.com/impact, you can see a map that shows all the different nonprofits that we've worked with, and it's at over 1,350 at this point. It's amazing. So there will be definitely some, there should be one near to where you live that we've worked with. And those people are doing amazing work. It's really, really exciting.
Wonderful. Incredible. Thank you so much, Leanne. This was awesome. Had a lot of fun. I know our audience really enjoyed this too. And thank you everyone for watching another Creator Hangout at Kickstarter. Bye.
Bye.